Okay, thank you so much for joining us on our second annual California FAFSA and CADAA Challenge for students experiencing homelessness kickoff webinar. That was a mouthful. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us to learn more about the FAFSA and CADAA Challenge and how we can all work together to support students experiencing homelessness as they matriculate into post-secondary education. So I am Sarah Potter. I'm a senior project manager with John Burton Advocates for Youth, and I will turn it over to Jillian to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Tatar, and I'm the Senior Higher Education Program Manager with Schoolhouse Connection.
Great. How about Leanne? You want to go next?
Hi, everyone. I am Leanne Wheeler, and I'm with the California Department of Education, and I'm one of 4 consultants that we consider ourselves state coordinators for homeless education. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Gpa and Schoolhouse Connection, inviting me.
Excellent. Sarah Jean?
Hello, my name is Sarah Jean Zuckline, and I'm also with the California Department of Education. However, I'm coming with the lens of data and talking all things data right here on behalf of Leanne.
Excellent. And Roxana?
Hi, everyone. My name is Roxana Solorio. I am with Kings County Office of Education. I work with the Foster Youth Services Coordinating Program and Homeless Youth as well. And thank you, J-Bay, for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So I'm going to quickly go over the agenda. So we're going to share some background information on the FAFSA and CADAA Challenge and why we decided to do this important initiative with students experiencing homelessness. I'll also provide some really important information on the policies and procedures surrounding the FAFSA challenge, including pertinent deadlines and resources that are available to you as you work to implement the challenge. We'll also spend some time talking about web grants and how to verify FAFSA CADAA completion when you're working with students experiencing homelessness. And then Leanne and our partners from Kings County, Roxana, will be sharing some really important information about why this challenge matters so much to them and what they've done specifically in Kings County to ensure that nearly 87% of their students experiencing homelessness complete the FAFSA. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on Q&A. We know that there's a lot of questions and that this challenge is new for many of you. So we want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask those questions, and we'll provide answers. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a J-Bay and Schoolhouse Connection webinar if we did not have an abundance of resources for you. So we'll talk more about what those resources are and how you can request technical assistance from us at the end. So to kind of give us a better idea of who is joining us today, please utilize the chat feature to share your name, your county that you reside in or where you're located, and then share your role with the FAFSA and CADAA Challenge. We'd also like to know if you have a completion rate goal for the 2022-23 challenge. We're very eager to hear what goals folks have, and these of course can be very practical goals or they can be very aspirational. Either way, we want to hear about it. So please utilize the chat, and again, share your name, your county, your role with the FAFSA and CADAA Challenge, and then your goal for this year's FAFSA CADAA Challenge. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jillian.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So as you're all here, we want to ensure that our students are getting access to going to college. And right now you might be asking, like, what with the pandemic and just everything kind of going on, we know that some of our students are making that decision, is college worth it? And we are here to say, yes, post-secondary education is absolutely critical for our students to be able to get a job, to afford a life so they can overcome the cycle of homelessness and be able to have some stability. And so this graph here shows that 99% of jobs created between the Great Recession and the COVID-19 crisis have gone to those with at least some sort of college degree. There was another report by the Georgetown University center that said that mostly with these jobs too, we need to be able to ensure that these jobs are good paying jobs as well, which then ensures that this requires some sort of post-secondary higher education. Next slide. But for many of our students, we know that that's easier said than done. So for our students experiencing homelessness, pursuing a post-secondary education is a little bit more challenging compared to some of their peers. The biggest one mostly is the lack of parental and familial support. A lot of times students that are navigating accessing college, they don't have a family, they don't have that support system that some of their peers might have to understand how to apply for college, what does applying for college actually mean and look like, and know that it's a reality. Again, as I previously stated, there's a lot of skepticism about the value of higher education. Tuition has soared throughout the last few years, and some students, as they are graduating from high school, they're looking at the value of pursuing a post-secondary education and saying, you know, that's just not worth it. Maybe I should go straight into the workforce right away. And they don't want to pursue a higher education because they're seeing the amount of potential debt that they might have to pay. They don't want to take out student loans. And so they decide not to pursue a higher education at all. And then in 2016, a GAO report found that homeless and foster youth had experienced a lot of barriers while trying to access financial aid due to burdensome program rules in terms of what qualifies students experiencing homelessness or students who are in foster care, the amount of extensive documentation that they need to provide to be able to access financial aid. As we know, for many of our homeless youth, they need to provide a determination letter, and that can be really tricky for some of our students to get, especially if they weren't identified while they were in high school. And not only do they need to provide this documentation to the school, to the financial aid office, but at times they need to provide it year after year with the Fafsa, which can be really traumatizing and re-triggering, having to share their story over and over again. Another piece that we're seeing is just limited academic preparation for our students. We know that in addition to some of the obstacles and barriers that they face while just, going to school, being able to be successful academically can be a struggle for them. And that really shined a light during the pandemic when many of our students didn't have access to internet, or they didn't have access to devices like a laptop or a hotspot, or those sorts of things. We are seeing that implications of the pandemic on many of our students' academics, with the decrease with math and English and things like that. And so we know that that has definitely carried on for our students as they are planning on pursuing that post-secondary education. And then lastly, one of the biggest barriers that we see over and over again, and the whole reason why that we are doing this FAFSA and CADAA challenge, is just accessing financial aid. Filling out the FAFSA and the CADAA is extremely confusing, but especially more so for our students, and even more so when they don't have a supportive adult or anyone there to help explain them, what does this question mean and what are they actually signing up for when they are filling out the FAFSA. The questions can be confusing, and at times we've seen so many of our students just decide, it's again not worth it. I don't know how to answer this question, and I'm just going to not fill out the FAFSA, not pursue that post-secondary degree. And so I'm really excited that a little bit later in these next few months, JBA is going to be hosting a webinar that we'll talk about a little bit later that talks through, how to help a student experiencing homeless fill out the FAFSA. We're going to go step by step by each question. So again, we want to make sure that our students are aware that they can fill out the FAFSA, know that it's super important to fill out the FAFSA in order to pursue that post-secondary education, and want to do everything that we can that we are to target them, to help them, support them. And I'm really excited to be part of this challenge to help our California youth get that access. Next slide. All right. And so again, we want to make sure, again, really clear picture of showing the impact that financial aid has for our students. High school seniors that complete the FAFSA are 63% more likely to enroll in some sort of higher education. And so the higher the amount of financial aid they receive, the higher the likelihood that they will successfully transfer or then graduate. The FAFSA is opening up on October 1st, so we want to make sure that we are getting students to fill out the FAFSA as soon as possible, because again, the sooner they're able to fill out the FAFSA, the more aid that they are more likely to get once it's filed.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jillian. So I'm going to jump in to talking a little bit about the FAFSA and CADAA challenge. So for those of you who've participated in our foster youth FAFSA and CADAA challenge that launched back in 2017, you're probably already familiar with this data, but maybe for those of you who didn't know this, we started this challenge originally with foster youth because we knew that while the large majority of them were eligible for the Pell Grant, very few were actually receiving the Pell Grant, indicating that they weren't completing the FAFSA, and thus leaving literally millions, if not billions of dollars on the table that could be spent on their efforts to pursue post-secondary education. So when we launched a challenge back in 2017, the rate of foster youth FAFSA completion was 45%. And since that challenge launched 6 years ago, we've seen the FAFSA completion rate amongst foster youth statewide increase nearly 20 percentage points. And in 2019, 2020, as well as this most recent year, 21, 22, foster youth in California have completed the FAFSA at a higher rate than their non-foster youth high school senior counterparts. And these were huge milestones for the challenge and something that we wanted to replicate for students experiencing homelessness, which is really, why we created this challenge, which is now in its second year. So again, we're hoping to see similar gains with our students experiencing homelessness. And I can't emphasize enough just how critical our County Office of Ed partners have been in the foster youth FAFSA challenge. We know that the challenge for students experiencing homelessness is casting a much wider net. It's going to require partnership with the County Office of Education, with the LEAs, including districts and individual high schools to sort of replicate the same level of success. And so we're just so grateful that you all are here and willing to embark on this challenge. So just a quick overview of the challenge for students experiencing homelessness. It is going to be it's structured a little bit different than the foster youth challenge, which really relies on the County Office of Education. We know that there are just so many more students experiencing homelessness that just by sheer number, it's going to take a lot more partners at the table. And so homeless education liaisons will serve as the central coordinators, and those can be homeless education liaisons within County Office of Education. It can also be homeless education liaisons at school districts or even individual high schools. We've really opened up the challenge to invite as many folks as possible who are interested and want to participate. So it takes sort of a variety of different shapes. Another really important aspect, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit of greater detail, is the ability to use web grants to verify FAFSA and CADAA completion. So web grants is a database that's managed by the California Student Aid Commission, or CSAC for short. And it's essentially will tell you definitively if a student has completed a FAFSA or CADAA, as well as if there's any issues with that FAFSA or CADAA application. The ability to verify FAFSA completion with web grants has really transformed our FAFSA challenge over the years, because we found that verbal reports or verbal confirmation that an application was submitted is unreliable. And it doesn't tell you if there are issues with that application, and that's information we can get from web grants. The homeless education liaisons aren't necessarily going to be the ones who work one-on-one with the students to complete the FAFSA or CADAA, but rather their role is to coordinate and train partners and really figure out who the adult supporters are of high school seniors experiencing homelessness so that they have the resources that they need to ensure that the student is completing the application correctly, and also in a way that helps them maximize financial aid. And that's really particularly important for our students who are unaccompanied, because if they are unaccompanied homeless students, they do typically qualify for what's called independent student status on the FAFSA, meaning that they won't have to provide any sort of parental income information, which will then enable them to be eligible for higher amounts of financial aid and grants. And since this is the second year of our challenge for students experiencing homelessness, we're still trying to figure out, what are the replicable strategies? What's working? What can other counties and districts do to really scale this work? And so again, we are treating the second year as a pilot. We want to make sure that folks kind of know that the expectation out the gate is not that they all reach a 100% completion rate. I mean, it's very admirable, and someday we'll get there, but our hope right now is to just continue to figure out what are the strategies that are working, how can we coordinate partners, and really kind of do this work together. I'm going to get into some of the nuts and bolts here for a bit. Before anybody panics, just know that all of these policies and procedures are written in and available for you on our website. I'll have Jillian drop in the link to our tools and resources page where you can download these policies and refer to them throughout the year. But just quickly, I will share that we often get asked, like, well, who's included? How do we figure out who's included in the challenge? And so we include all 12th graders experiencing homelessness, regardless of credit count. So that can include high school seniors who are on a non-diploma track. It can also include seniors who are on a special education certificate of completion track. We do not exclude those students from the challenge. One reason being is that it's incredibly difficult to track those students. As many of you probably know, you have students who kind of move between being a junior and senior throughout the year. You might not know that they're going to be a fifth-year senior until way later in the year. So it's just not practical for many folks to exclude them. So they are included in sort of your baseline count. The other thing to be aware of, because we want to make this fair, and I will say I've learned from our foster youth FAFSA and CADAA challenge that there is a very competitive spirit behind this work. And so in order to make it fair, we only ask that you include students in your baseline count if they were under your jurisdiction, meaning they're in your county, they're in your district, or in your school, depending on your role and how your challenge is going to be rolled out, for 30 or more cumulative days. So if you had a student, and we know that these students are highly mobile, if you had a student who was in your county only from October 1st and then left on October 15th, we don't want them to sort of count against your completion rate. So those students can be excluded. The other thing to know, like I mentioned already, is that verification through web grants is required. And institutions or, LEAs and COEs can either use web grants for institutions, or they can use what's called a Winscp secure file transfer system that was developed by CSAC specifically for the FAFSA and CADAA challenge. And I will go into much more detail about that. So don't panic just yet. So in terms of reporting deadlines for the challenge, we have 2 reporting periods. The first is March 24th, 2023. So that's the date that the data will be due to Gpa. We will send out a JOT form asking you for your total number of 12th graders experiencing homelessness, your number of students who completed the FAFSA or CADAA, and then your completion rate, basically using those 2 data points. The first report will encompass the October 1st through March 2nd period. So the date that the FAFSA or CADAA opens, which is October 1st, through the priority deadline for Cal Grant consideration, which is March 2nd. The second report will be due to us on June 9th, 2023, and that will encompass October 1st through May 19th, which is the end of the challenge, and that will be cumulative. So we want to see the total number. So that June 9th report should really build off of what was already included in your March 24th report. To simplify this, we know that the data tracking can be really time consuming. we have developed an internal tracking tool. So it's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download from the same website that you're downloading the policies and procedures from. And that tracking tool will help you sort of take your rosters of high school seniors experiencing homelessness, list them, sort of indicate if they've completed the FAFSA or CADAA. If they haven't, you can also indicate that. It will also automatically determine if that student should be included in your baseline. So just like the example I shared earlier, if they were not in your county for 30 or more cumulative days, say they came into your county on November 1st, and then left before the end of the month, when you put their exit date, it will say that no, they should be excluded. So they don't, again, count against your completion rate. The one thing we do, because we want to give credit where credit is due, is if you have a student under your jurisdiction who was under your jurisdiction for less than 30 days, but they do complete a FAFSA or CADAA, you get credit for them. So we will count them in your baseline and in your completion rate. And that Excel spreadsheet will do all of that fun calculating for you. We've really tried to take out all of the mental gymnastics that you have to do and just let the form do it instead. And that's available again for you to download and use off of our webpage. So here comes the really fun part. In terms of calculating the baseline, a lot of folks are often wondering, like, how do I figure out, who my high school seniors are who are experiencing homelessness? Where do I get this information? How do I track it? How often should I be tracking it, etc.? So working with Sarah Jean and Leanne, we've really kind of determined that the best way to pull this information is from CalPADS, and you can use either the 1.18 report. This is the census day report. The one thing to know about this, though, is that census day is like typically, I think, annually in the first week of October, but the data is not certified and published until January. And so it won't be available to sort of determine, which students are high school seniors experiencing homelessness. So it's recommended that you use either an 8.1, 5.4, or 5.5 report from CalPADS. This data will actually be sort of looking at your high school juniors. It's end of year data. So you'll want to look at your high school juniors from the previous year to see kind of who those incoming seniors are. And you can identify them then and utilize that as your list for the October 1st start date of the challenge. It's recommended that folks sort of use a variety of these reports to build the most comprehensive list. I also really strongly encourage folks, especially those who are at the district or the individual high school level, to utilize their student information system. We learned last year during the challenge that this ended up having the most up-to-date and accurate information. And so that's a really great resource to use, again, to kind of build that cumulative report and sort of merge with those other reports from CalPADS to get the most comprehensive list. The other thing to know, this is a highly mobile population, and throughout the duration of the challenge, you will have students who enter your county, your district, or your school. You will have students who exit either your jurisdiction or maybe no longer McKinney-Vento eligible. And so it's really important that you rerun these reports and kind of look for changes between those reports and your cumulative list of high school seniors that are in that internal tracking tool we developed, just to identify any changes. If you are a larger county, I'm thinking like if you're in Los Angeles or Riverside or any of those jurisdictions, it probably makes sense to run those reports once a week or every other week, especially early on in the challenge, to look for those changes. For smaller counties and smaller districts and individual schools, sometimes once a month suffices, but it really does depend on the number of students experiencing homelessness that you serve. And I'd be happy to kind of chat with you and provide some TA around how frequently to run these reports to build that list. And again, determining FAFSA CADAA completion is done through web grants. So LEAs and individual high schools can utilize web grants for institutions and work with their existing web grants administrator to verify completion. One thing to know as well, we worked very, very hard with CSAC this past year to make sure that homeless education liaisons housed in COEs, LEAs, and individual high schools can utilize the new Winscp secure file transfer system. So if you don't have a web grants administrator, or maybe they don't have the bandwidth to be the one verifying FAFSA or CADAA completion, we have a tool for you. So I'm going to show you what that looks like next. I'm really excited about this. But before I get to web grants, there is one thing I want to say just about data sharing. So this question came up a lot during our initial pilot year, and this is particularly relevant for our county offices of education who are participating in this challenge, as well as any of the districts who are sort of partnering with their county offices of education on the challenge as well. So just one thing to know, homeless education liaisons within county offices of education do not have access to student level information in CalPads. And so it's recommended that they work with their local districts to determine the best method to exchange that data. I will say too, this is not a legal opinion. Let me preface it that way, Leanne. But the sharing of information between LEAs, including county offices of education, districts, and high schools, for the purposes of tracking and supporting financial aid completion is permitted by FERPA. It's also permitted by our California Education Code. In Appendix A of our policies and procedures for the challenge, we have a summary of relevant statutory language that relates to the sharing of information for this purpose. So if you're working with a district or a county and you're sort of wondering about the exchange of information, I highly recommend that you look at that appendix and review the language so that you feel comfortable. But it is an area where this is a legitimate educational interest. McKinney-Vento is also very clear that part of the role of homeless education liaisons includes coordination of FAFSA completion. So again, there's a lot of language already in existence that permits the sharing of information. And I should preface that or include without parental consent, the sharing of information without parental consent. So that's my not legal opinion. And so the other thing I will say too, some of the county offices of education that led the challenge last year and had a lot of success worked with their districts to provide their 8.1 reports on a monthly basis. And this was hugely helpful in determining that baseline and figuring out who those high school seniors experiencing homelessness are. The county offices of education shared instructions to all of the district liaisons on how to generate that 8.1 report. And they also developed a schedule. So they said, hey, the first Friday of every month, submit that report to us so we can help track and do the outreach around FAFSA completion. And these are resources, again, that would be glad to share. So reach out and let me know if this is an issue that you're coming up against, and Jillian and I will help create some of those resources and schedules for data exchange. All right, now the fun part, we're gonna talk about web grants, and then I promise I will eventually stop talking. So like I mentioned, there are two methods really to do FAFSA and CADAA verification using web grants. The first is sort of what I refer to as like the old-fashioned way, which is using web grants for institutions. Most COEs, LEAs, even individual high schools and districts will have an existing administrator access in place for web grants. And so you might have to do a little bit of digging to figure out who your web grants administrator is. But in order to access web grants for institutions, it does require a login credential that is granted through either submission or renewal of a web grants administrator access request. That request has to be signed off on by a superintendent. So it is a little bit of a heavy lift to get that done at times. If you use web grants for institutions to look up FAFSA and CADAA completion, you must look up each individual student, each student experiencing homelessness by going into that student's school. And so that's a little bit of a tricky sort of labor intensive process. So it can be really hard for counties that are, or districts or schools that have high numbers of students experiencing homelessness, because it just becomes very labor intensive to look them up one by one. Given that issue, we worked with the California Student Aid Commission to create what is called the Winscp Secure File Transfer System. This method is new, but it makes this process so much easier. And because CSAC is such a wonderful partner in this work, they are granting access to all of our COEs, LEAs, districts, high schools who are participating in the challenge. It does require initial configuration, so you have to get the Winscp system downloaded. You get an individual sort of token, which is like your password that you'll use when you want to run a report in the system. And then you also have to sort of map it to some directories on your computer. So if you have a really great IT team, this is a great project for them just to do the initial configuration. If you don't, our partners at CSAC are really helpful with this initial configuration. So please reach out. This should not be a heavy burden or heavy lift. We want to make sure that this is as easy as possible for you. The great thing about this system is that FAFSA and CADAA completion can be verified by uploading or even dragging and dropping your cumulative list of high school seniors experiencing homelessness, and then downloading a matched report, often within just a few minutes. So it's an automated system, and you can run this report as frequently as needed. So if you have a high number of students experiencing homelessness, this is something you could run every day. You can run it once a week. There's no sort of limit. And it only takes a few minutes. I promise you, after you do the initial configuration, it's so smooth. So I really do strongly encourage you to get on board with the Winscp system. If you are interested in getting the system set up, you can email me. I'll have Jillian drop my email in the chat. We also have instructions on that same FAFSA challenge policies and tools webpage that will show you how to configure Winscp initially, and then how to upload and download a report. So all of those resources are there and available for you. One other thing I will mention, because I never cease to create resources, is that we will be doing a webinar and probably developing some additional resources on just interpreting the results. So once you download your Winscp match template, we'll have some additional like instructions. I'm hoping to do a webinar as well, just to sort of walk people through the process so they can see it. So more to come on that. Hopefully that'll be rolling out in November. But again, this is just this is the Winscp sort of laid out in a simple and easy to understand way. So you log in with your credentials that CSAC gives you. You upload or drag or drop your file into that Winscp folder. The automated process starts, so they do all the data matching, and then you get a report often within 30 to 90 minutes, depending on the number of students that are in your file. When your report's ready to download, CSAC sends you an email that says, hey, it's ready to go, and then you simply just go back into the folder and download it. So I'm actually going to stop my screen share with the slides here because I want to show you what data you get back from that report. So just give me 1 second while I switch over to a different document. Sorry. Of course, everything's going to go slow for me right now. But I do want to show you what this looks like because I am also of the mindset that seeing is believing. So let me get it open. Come on, Excel. Okay, here we go. Let me just say too that this is not a reflection of the file. This is a reflection of the fact that I have 30 Chrome browser tabs open. So my computer is going a little bit slow because I need to close some of these tabs out. All right. So let me share this briefly. Let me get back over here. Okay. Can everyone see that? Can I get a thumbs up from my panel? All right, thank you. Okay, so this is what the template for the Winscp tool looks like. So essentially you'll put in the student's SSID number. So the fields in green are what you input. So their SSID, their CSAC ID will generate through the data match. So you don't need to know that information. And then you'll include the student's last name, their first name, and their date of birth. One thing that I will point out too is that we did leave Chafee grant information in here. We recognize that you might also work with students who are experiencing homelessness that are former foster youth and would qualify for the Chafee. So this will tell you if they did complete the Chafee and if the Chafee was awarded. We just think that's good information to know in case you're working with students who qualify for that. You'll see here under Cal Grant information, if they submitted the application, so it could show as a yes, the application was submitted, or it was late, meaning that they submitted it after the March 2nd deadline. It'll also tell you if there's none. And it can also tell you if there was an issue, like they weren't able to calculate the student's expected family contribution. The fields over here around GPA are really important as well. Many of you probably know that in order to be eligible for the Cal Grant, the students' GPA must be submitted by their high school. This is something that they are obligated to do under statute, but it doesn't always happen. And it's really important that you're sort of looking for the yeses and the nos here, because what happens is if their GPA isn't submitted, then they don't get consideration for the Cal Grant, which is really a lot of money they could potentially be leaving on the table. So you'll want to see if there was a no here, like especially if they had a yes application, but a no for the GPA match, and then helping to sort of troubleshoot that with the high school so that student's GPA does get submitted. It will also tell you if their Cal Grant was awarded, which is fantastic. So you'll know that they're good to go. It will tell you the date that the FAFSA or CADAA application was submitted. The other columns that I want to point out here are in Q and R. So some of the most common errors that we see with the FAFSA and CADAA application is that their first name, last name, or their date of birth doesn't match. So whatever they said their first name, last name is, and their date of birth on the FAFSA application might not be what the school submitted when they submitted that student's GPA. So there could be a mismatch. And that means that they're not able to fully process the student's application for financial aid. So you can see here if there was an issue with that match, and then you can work with the California Student Aid Commission to help sort of mitigate that issue and figure out what's going wrong. You'll also see a column here with GPA hold. Like I mentioned, it's sometimes the student's GPA does not get submitted. More often, I think, than a non-submission, we see, especially with highly mobile student populations, that they'll have more than one school submit their GPA. And so that can cause some confusion as well. And in instances like that, if the student had more than one GPA submitted by multiple schools, you'll see them listed here. So you can see all of the schools that submitted the GPA for that student, and then you can help troubleshoot that with CSAC to figure out which GPA was correct, and then make sure that their application ends up completed. So again, this is a great tool to see that their FAFSA application was, yes or no, but also to see if there were issues or errors with their application that needs some following up so that student's financial aid ends up getting awarded. So again, we have a lot of resources on this on our website. We're also providing technical assistance around using this tool. And we'll be doing another sort of webinar just on this process alone. And we'll be sure to make sure that everyone gets the invite and information about that. All right, so that covers our FAFSA CADAA challenge policies and procedures, our important deadlines, and how to verify FAFSA and CADAA completion. So I think without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Leanne.
Thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you to Schoolhouse Connection and Gpa for inviting Sarah, Jean, and I to be here. You're in the driver's seat, Sarah, correct? Okay, just wanted to make sure, double check. It's kind of funny after I hear from Jillian and I hear from Sarah. you really don't need to hear a lot from us, because what they are talking about is exactly a repeat of kind of what I'm talking about, except for that, looking at the participant list, you guys have, most of you have heard this, you're not alone. So this is all about collaboration and professional development and technical assistance. You are probably not going to be the expert when it comes to FAFSA. It's not your responsibility to be an expert, but you got to have a general understanding and idea of where your homeless kids are and who is the FAFSA expert in your LEA or in your COE, and how are you going to provide technical assistance and professional development around it. So the first slide that I want to show you is kind of a sad one. And you know me, I don't always like to start off with sadness, but because of COVID, we have seen a decrease in the number of unaccompanied youth, in the number of homeless youth in general, and also the FAFSA application cycle. So in 2021, we saw a good 600 kids missing from this situation. And so, as you have always heard me say, as a broken record, we really need to find these kids. We really want to put ourselves out of a job in homelessness and get these kids college and career ready. And so it's our responsibility to identify them and get them to college and career readiness. And that is by providing, again, technical assistance, professional development, collaboration within your LEA and within your county. Next slide. So I am all about somebody else being the expert when it comes to FAFSA and career and college readiness for our homeless kids. And so we start off with a couple of resources. I know that you have heard me talk about the California Homeless Youth Project and ACLU doing a survey of our homeless liaisons a couple of years back, and they created developed two reports. One was on homeless liaisons and the lack of capacity that they have to do their jobs. And then the second one was supporting homeless students experiencing homelessness, the perspectives of the California's Community College report. And you can read that report there at that URL link. But why I bring it up is because they had 5 of the greatest needs in this report. And guess what? The number 2 greatest need was accessibility to the FAFSA. So next slide, you will see that, of course, the number 1 is connections to housing. We never have enough housing in California. But the second one was the completion of FAFSA, the accessibility of FAFSA. And so that's where we as homeless liaisons, whether we're at the district or the county level, we really need to connect with those people. And so we need to make sure that our school counselors and our teachers and anybody and everybody that can help with the completion for our homeless youth and our unaccompanied homeless youth, it's really important. We also know, obviously, with this report that mental health needs are higher than most, and supportive services beyond our campuses, and of course, the help with CalFresh and food insecurities. So the next slide goes into talking about the other resources when it comes to what the law says. And the law says, as a homeless liaison, you must ensure that unaccompanied homeless youth are informed of their status as independent students. As Sarah indicated, these students get possibly a higher financial aid. They don't use their parents' financial paperwork. And so it's really important that you understand that this is part of your job. Another responsibility that you need to assist. And you can't do it all by yourself. And as like Sarah said, it's really not you, it's the counselors, it's the people that are on the campuses that are helping those kids fill out the FAFSA, engaging them, encouraging them, making them excited about college or career. And so it's, once again, falls on you to provide that technical assistance, that professional development, and that opportunity to collaborate and connect. Next slide. So again, as the homeless liaison, you can provide the verification of a homeless unaccompanied youth as an independent person. You can help them with their financial aid process as long as you know that they are in a homeless situation. So that's where the collaboration comes from. Maybe the school counselors or the teachers or the frontline people that are working with these kids for the FAFSA or the college and career readiness, they don't realize that they're homeless. These kids are very reluctant to let people know that they are in a homeless situation, that they're couch surfing, that they're living, you know, in the backyard of a friend's house. Wherever they are, they're scared. They don't want to be reunited with their family for whatever reason. And that's not our responsibility to judge or try to reunify them. We need to get them in school, ready to learn, and hopefully break that cycle of homelessness. So let's also try to get them into college with some financial aid. Next slide. Of course, you guys all know you're very important to me, but you're also very important to our homeless youth, whether they're an unaccompanied homeless youth or a 0 to 5 year old. You are important, and you are one of the 4 people that can make that determination of an independent student. You, along with a HUD, Emergency Program Director or Designee, a Runaway or Homeless Youth Program Director or Designee, or a College Financial Aid Administrator. Well, of those 4 people, guess who has more connection with these kids? It's you as the homeless liaison. You're one step closer to them than a HUD director or a Runaway Youth Program Director. So between me and my director, I actually have one more person. So my director is 2 steps away from my liaisons. And I call you guys my liaisons because you are. You're part of my family. You're part of the work that I do. Next slide. Can't do this alone. You need to collaborate. You need to talk to your districts and your LEAs about a district-wide activities to engage kids in college and career readiness. Your high schools are already doing that, but you want to get out there and really emphasize those kids that are in a homeless situation. You want to make sure that your homeless students are able to visit college campuses along with all other kids, that they have the means to do that. If there's an educational barrier, such as a financial piece, or they're nervous about who's to sign the field trip form, you need to remove that barrier so that these kids can get the same resources and the experiences that a non-homeless student gets. You need to, of course, work together. Liaisons need to talk to school counselors. School counselors need to talk to liaisons. You need to talk to your data person. Maybe work with them as Sarah was giving you all different kinds of links about, data collection. Talk to those people that can look at the numbers that then help you make sense of it. Sarah Jean can give me all kinds of numbers, but if she doesn't explain to me what that exactly means, what's the difference between cumulative and a part, point in time versus free and reduced lunch, I can just read the slide and not really understand it. So you've got to work with your data people. You've got to talk to your teachers. Your teachers are your frontline people looking at those kids saying, that sweatshirt's been worn for the last 10 days. That kid has fallen asleep in my class. He looks pretty run down. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe I need to inform somebody to do a check-in. And then, of course, you always want to be talking with your attendance clerks and your registrars to help to identify these kids and make sure that they're engaged in school, getting ready for college and career readiness. Next slide. Well, that 4-letter word, data, it's a difficult one. It's a lot more difficult than our foster youth data. Our homeless kids have to be identified from the bottom up, whereas our foster kids are identified from the top down. So these systems don't necessarily always work hand in hand with us. These reports are difficult sometimes to pull. And there's a lot of questions about when I pull CADAA's data here versus here. I don't always see them aligned. I don't understand it because that's a 4-letter word. Sarah Jean can explain it to me probably 10 times before I understand. And then again, I get the question, I go, okay, you got to go back to Sarah Jean. I still don't understand. So you're not alone. So talk to somebody that can explain it to you and explain it to you at your level. How is this important? Compare last year's juniors to this year's seniors. Who was homeless that was a junior last year? Are they now homeless as a senior? Who was homeless on the first Wednesday of October? What seniors were homeless? Sarah Jean offered a wonderful link about college going rate for California high school students. It is a couple years old, and we're hoping that someday we're going to be able to update it. And this is not just for our homeless kids, it's for other populations, from what I understand. And the reason why we haven't updated it was because we, California Department of Ed, have to contract out and pay somebody a lot more money to provide this kind of statistics. So Sarah Jean was able to provide an image, which is on the next slide, of the 2017-18 college going rate for California high school students. So
I'm
back
going
then,
to jump in here real quick. Sorry. This updated report is in the process of going live. So we actually have been working on getting the next 3 years up and running on our CDE webpage for DataQuest. So you can dig into DataQuest and filter out to get the latest numbers. Not yet, but we'll put, if you're subscribed to the DataQuest update listserv, then you'll get the notification when this has been updated, but it'll be before the end of this year. So before the end of 2022, we'll have more current numbers, even going into the 2020 school year.
So go ahead and explain this chart.
Yeah, so these numbers are basically showing California high school seniors who've graduated, and this includes 4- and 5-year graduates, and whether they went to a California college or a college in a different country or across the country. We were able to track down that's why we have to resource out to the National Student Clearinghouse to get these numbers. But essentially, this is showing that the homeless students who are making it into a college and completing their first year of college are about 50%, which is almost 15% less than non-homeless students. And this was, again, several years ago. So once the new report is published, I'm very curious to see how these numbers will change. Let's hopefully close this gap, and that's where you guys can play a role.
Thanks, Sarah Jean. I think that one of the questions was, could you send the link, put the link in the chat of the data listserv? We could also send out, make sure that when that listserv goes out, or that announcement, we can also do it through our homeless education resource listserv. So speaking of resources, that was a great segue. I have two slides, and then I'm going to turn it over again to Sarah Jean. And it's all about resources. I think it's really important that as homeless liaisons and people in the field that are working with our homeless population, to spend, you know, just a small amount of time, 30 minutes a week, to just surf the web on what kind of resources are out there for homeless children and youth and educators. So California has been blessed to have 3 wonderful homeless education technical assistance centers. San Diego, Los Angeles, and Contra Costa County offices are our leads, and they have a new, wonderful, powerful, insightful, resourceful, blah, 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 website. And they have, obviously, they have a wonderful higher education piece. And so please click on that link and see what they have to offer specifically to higher ed. They typically write the way that they build out their pages is they give the national resources, the state resources, and then sometimes the local resources. And so it's really nice to see those websites up and running, and it's a lot easier to maneuver than our California Department of Education's homeless website. The National Center for Homeless Education, which is the Technical Assistance Center for the United States Department of Education, which is obviously vetted with all the federal laws, has also a general higher education website. You might see some duplications between these 2 websites. But again, if you're looking for the higher ed, there's the 2 links, but those overall 2 agencies have so many other resources as well as it relates to engagement, identification, enrollment, professional development, all the things that a homeless liaison is responsible and required to do. The next slide of resources is making unaccompanied homeless youth determinations, a tool for financial aid administrators. Oh no, you have to collaborate with financial aid administrators. If you have colleges or community colleges in your county, in your school district that you know your kids are probably going to be going to, you should reach out to them, introduce yourself, go have coffee, you know, talk about the importance of our homeless population. They've been already probably doing it for a number of years for our foster youth, but now we really want to do an emphasis on our homeless youth. So give them this this resource, help them out. And then obviously there's another NCHE, National Center for Homeless Education resource, which is entitled Increasing Access to Higher Ed for Unaccompanied Homeless Youth. And it's information for colleges and universities. So please use those to bridge that relationship. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Jean. She's got a great resource called Cow Kids.
So if you're not aware of this already, this is a new initiative, and essentially the California Department of Education and Public Health have partnered together and have created basically seed accounts. And the next slide, please. And essentially, homeless students will be eligible for $1,000. It's not eligible, it's automatically there. There is a bank account as long as a student has an SSID and they've enrolled in a public school at any time during the 21-22 school year or 22 2022 school year, they automatically have a $500 deposit in their account. And if they're homeless at any time, they get an extra $500. So that's $1,000 just right off the bat that's sitting there. And next slide. All they have to do is go in and register. All they need is their SSID, their birthday, the county where they went to school, and right there they will be able to access this account. So this is seed money. It's immediate. It's a savings account. If they don't go to college right away, it'll still be there, and they're eligible just because they went to school here in California. So please keep this as another resource for just $1,000 right out the door. They don't have to do anything special. It's so simple. They've really streamlined this so that there's no hoops you have to jump through. It's just there. So so if any of you all have children and they are in public school, they also have this $500 just for, going to public school. So next slide. So Leanne, you want to close us out?
Sure. So I was just going to say that, Sarah Jean, for those the 56 people that are on this, if you have a school-aged child, check it out for yourself. I mean, granted, a lot of times we don't need that extra $500, but yes, we do. I have to tell you, my kid is going to a community college. It's a 4-year program. And I did set up a college fund for him when he was a year old. Holy moly, just a community college. And even with COVID relief, there's still expenses, his living expenses, his food. So it's really important. Try it out for yourself, and just try it out. Anyways, last and not least, if you have further questions that the California Department of Education can assist you with, we have our homeless education general email there at homelessed@cde.ca.gov. That email will go to one person, which then will disperse it to whoever needs to. If it's around data, we'll send it to Sarah Jean. If it's about ARP, HCY2, it will come to me. All those different things. And I think that I just want to say one more time, thank you very much for all that you do. Thank you, Gpa. Thank you, Schoolhouse Connection. If you do have questions about FAFSA, those are the 2 programs that you probably need to reach out to a lot better, because I'm probably going to turn it over to them anyways. So thank you again. Take care. Stay safe. Be careful.
Thank you so much, Leanne and Sarah Jean. That was so much helpful knowledge. And I just took notes about those CalKids savings accounts because my first grader went to the air show and now he's going to be a Blue Angel, and Emory Riddle is very expensive. So I will take what I can get. So next, I'm really excited to talk about and share our next panelists. So we have Roxana Solorio from Kings County Office of Education. And they participated in our inaugural FAFSA challenge for students experiencing homelessness last year. And I'm really excited for her to share sort of what this looks like in their county and how their county Office of Ed has really taken charge of the challenge. So Roxana, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here and share some strategies that worked for our county and completing the FAFSA applications for our homeless youth. So, sorry, next slide, please. So here's our Foster Youth Services Coordinating Program. Here's our team, and they helped me, win this challenge. We did win with 86% completion. So I'm excited to share that as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So of course, we started off with the goal that we wanted to reach 100% for the FAFSA application completion, but we knew we were going to face some challenges. And so we started by just gathering data from all the high schools in our 14 districts. Thank you. So 5 out of those 14 districts in our Kings County are high school districts, and they are Corcoran Joint, Hanford Joint Union High School, and Kings County Office of Ed as well, Lemoore Union High School, and Reef Sunset. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I kind of wrote down in this slide more of a step-by-step on how we gather data from each school site. We first start off by reaching out to our school site liaisons, and for our district, the school site liaisons would be the school social workers. So from there, our social workers would contact their CalPETS technicians, and each school site has a different CalPETS technician. So they would request an 8.1 report to be submitted by the liaisons in our district every 4 months. So the school site liaison would email their CalPETS technicians to have the report ready every 4 months. Once they receive that report, then they would email it back to our office. And then from that, we would receive the report and download it as an Excel spreadsheet. And we would filter the report by grade level and school site. So for example, for the month of April, I would have, let's say Hanford Joint submitted their report. I would break it down by the month that they submitted and by grade level for each month. And then we would go based on there. So we would have all the data for the seniors and to know how many seniors we had in that district. Next slide, please. And like Leanne said, you know, this couldn't have been possible without collaboration. We really collaborated with our school site liaisons and CalPET technicians, and then our entire team to make this happen. School counselors as well helped throughout this process. And once we knew all the data and we knew how many students we had at each site, I would reach out to the school liaison and social worker, and they were the ones who would schedule these appointments with the students. They would let me know what meetings, what time I can meet with the students and to help them one-on-one. And I started off going on to web grants. And there I was able to verify which students had completed their FAFSA, which ones didn't have it complete yet. And from there, they provided again a schedule of when I can meet with each student. Once I had that, prior to the meeting with the student one-on-one, our school social workers would meet with them, and they ensured that the student had their social security number, any parent information that was needed, like tax information, things like that, and also their unaccompanied determination letter. They had to fill that out before meeting with me. So that way, when I met with them, we could just focus on correctly completing the FAFSA application, and also with their web grants account. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in this slide right here, I kind of did more of a step-by-step on what it looked like once I met with the students. So for example, of the seniors at Hanford High School, we have about 3 high schools in that district for Hanford Joint High. And I would meet with the students in their career center. That's where either the school social worker was at or the school counselor with their assistants, or I would just meet with them one-on-one. We began by providing a resource folder. And in this folder, we handed them information about, I printed out the Gpa step-by-step guide. If they had any questions, we followed that guide step-by-step. So if they had any questions at any time, we can just, I can answer their questions. And if I didn't understand something in the process, I would refer back to that guide just to better assist them. And also I created this password tracker sheet so they can write down their password and their email and their login information, because I know a lot of the times they'll either lose it or just forget it. So that was an easy way to track their password. And I made sure that each student had a personal email, because a lot of them were trying to use their school email to to apply for FAFSA, and most of them were seniors. So once they're out of school, the account would no longer work. So we created with, I want to say about 10 of them, I took the time to sit with them, help them go on Gmail and create their own personal account, made sure they saved their password information and email, and verified their phone number onto FAFSA. So we did that process, and I just basically helped them step by step with that. And then once we got into the FAFSA website, I helped them again with that step by step, making sure they filled out the correct information and provided parent information if needed, making sure they had their social security as well. And just, I was there for support for them and, provided any assistance that was needed. And once we were towards the end of the application, I would, take the time to slowly review the application and make sure everything was submitted correctly again. And then I also advise the students to apply 2 weeks after the FAFSA application was processed for web grants. Because for some reason at the time when we were applying, they weren't able to apply for web grants right away. So I would advise them to apply 2 weeks after that. And with some of them, I was able to follow up with the school social worker and meet with them to help them complete the web grants application and everything. And if I wasn't able to, I ensured that the school social worker would assist them as well. And I also advise the students to check their email frequently. I know a lot of them weren't really used to doing that. They had mentioned that they don't really check their email. So I just advise them to check it because that's where they'll receive all their updates from FAFSA or any college applications. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I had a couple questions on how we encourage students to apply for FAFSA, because I know a lot of the time students, it's an application, it can take a while and they don't want to do the process. And I just try to be really positive about this and, share that positiveness with them. I just let them know what FAFSA is and make sure they knew all the information there was regarding towards FAFSA. I just let them know that it positively impacts their education by providing so many career opportunities for them. Like if they wanted to go to school to be a cosmetologist, a nurse, a doctor, a counselor, a teacher, anything that they, any career that they wanted to pursue, FAFSA would help with that. It provided financial support to help them graduate from college or any vocational programs. And it's an opportunity for them to attend their dream school and pursue any career that they wanted again. Like if they wanted to attend Stanford or Fresno State or any colleges that they had in mind, FAFSA would allow them to do that. And one of the ideas that we came up with as our county office, we created a college gear form for the students to complete after filling this application. And in that form, they would write down their school name, their full name, the size of the t-shirt and sweatshirt they wanted. And this t-shirt and sweatshirt would be of their school of choice. Like in the pictures here, we had students that wanted to go to SJC, COS, Stanford. We had a couple from Virginia State, I think so. And of course, West Hills, and any college that they wanted to go to, we reached out and were able to provide a t-shirt and a sweatshirt for them. And I also have a picture here of the form. This is what the form looks like. And next slide, please. And this is the unaccompanied youth letter form that we would send out to the school. If the school social worker didn't already have this form, we would send it out to them, complete it for them, and then just have them sign it and make sure all the student information was correct. That way the students had a copy and we had a copy for them as well. Again, it was a lot of collaboration with the school social worker and school counselors as well. Next slide, please. So after I met with the students and I delivered the t-shirts and sweatshirts and everything, I wanted to follow up with the school social workers to ensure that the applications were, indeed filled out correctly. And I also verified on web grants and everything like that. And what we noticed from this challenge, we're gonna apply that for this upcoming school year, is we ensured that they were able to complete their FAFSA and their web grants. and also college applications. We wanted this year to make sure that not only did we help them apply for FAFSA, but we're also making sure that they know how to correctly fill out college applications and that they do receive acceptance from a college application and what are the next steps for that. So with our homeless challenge this year, we also, aside from helping them from FAFSA, we want to be able to help them with the college applications as well. So that's something we noticed from last year that we want to incorporate in our strategies for this school year. And if you have any questions about our strategies or any tips that we can share with you, here is our office information, and Andrea Chavez is the person in charge of, she will be the person in charge of the homeless challenge. And thank you. That is all.
Thank you. That was such a great presentation. I love how you really broke it down around all the things that you had to do sort of before the challenge when it came to connecting with districts and the school social workers and getting access to the data, and then all the strategies that you employed during the challenge to sort of encourage FAFSA completion and college application completion. And then the things that happen after the FAFSA, right? Which is making sure that the students get a Web Grants for Institutions account, and that they're checking to make sure that, if they get flagged for verification or they had to provide their homeless verification, that they're accessing Web Grants to get those messages from CSAC. And then the T-shirts and the sweatshirts. I mean, that is so incredible. What a huge motivator, and what a way to send a message to our students that their college material, that this is for them. I just love that. So we have a little bit of time left. I want to make sure that we have a chance to do Q&A. So I'm going to very quickly just run through our resources so we can spend the remaining time answering questions. So on our webpage, we have a ton of resources to not only assist with the challenge, but to actually help with the FAFSA and CADAA application process. We update these resources every year. And unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we don't get advanced copies of the FAFSA or the CADAA. So we, like everyone else, have to wait until October 1st when those applications are available. And then we very, very quickly kind of review them, take new screenshots, update our resources. And so all of these will be updated and available come mid-October. One thing that's new for this school year that we are incredibly excited about that is already complete is a high school counselor toolkit for the high school counselors who are supporting students experiencing homelessness with FAFSA and CADAA completion. It came up during our pilot year last year from one of our districts that this was really necessary. We also know that given Assembly Bill 469, that FAFSA completion is now a requirement for our liaison districts. And so we want to make sure that our students who are experiencing homelessness aren't sort of falling through the cracks when it comes to these larger efforts. That toolkit includes all sorts of information on how to identify if the student is experiencing homelessness, as well as if they're in an unaccompanied homeless youth. It also has a checklist on what to do before the FAFSA CADAA application, what to do during, and what to do after. It also has one of those sample homeless determination letters, just tons of resources and information in this toolkit. And we'll be sure to share that with everyone who attended today. In terms of the financial aid guide for California homeless youth, that will be updated come mid-October. And at that time, all of the folks who are participating in the challenge will get an email from me with an order form. So if you would like to get hard copies of that financial aid guide to share with your students, you can do so. So you can expect that request form from me come mid-October. We also have webinar trainings coming up on there are the how-to step-by-step webinars. We do one for foster youth, adult supporters, and we're also doing one for adult supporters of students experiencing homelessness. The visual guides, I think that's actually what Roxana was mentioning that she used when she was helping with that one-on-one application assistance. Those guides have screenshots of the FAFSA and CADAA, every single question on those applications, and you can reference it as you're working with a student to complete the application. It has pointers on sort of how to respond to certain questions if you're working with a student who is homeless. Then we also have posters and stickers and all that fun stuff. And since you've made it to the end of our kickoff webinar, I'm happy to share too that I saved this for last. I make people stick around for this information, that we are doing awards again this year. So we will be doing 2 rounds of awards of up to $1,000 in unrestricted funding to support your FAFSA completion and college matriculation efforts with students experiencing homelessness. So we will be sort of putting buckets or tiers together based off of the number of students experiencing homelessness in each county, district, or school. So you all are sort of competing against each other in a fair fashion. And then those with the highest completion rates in March and in May will get an award of up to $1,000. So more to come on the award process, but I wanted to make sure to share that. We also have the link here, that how-to webinar for FAFSA CADAA completion will be held on October 19th from 10:30 to 12 p.m. You can register on our website or at the link that is in the PowerPoint we'll be sending out. But for now, I want to open it up to Q&A. We have about 10 minutes. So if you want to come off of mute, just raise your hand and I can give you permission to speak. So I'll pay attention, see if any folks are raising their hands. You can also use the Q&A if you have a question that hasn't been answered yet. But yes, please feel free to raise your hand and then I can ask you to unmute.
We have one question. Oh, already. Oh, I think Roxana might have already answered it, but Roxana, do you want to share again how you all paid for the college sweatshirts?
Yes. So with the money that we won from the challenge, it worked out so good because it was the exact amount we needed to pay for the sweatshirts and the t-shirts all together. So we just used that money for the college gear.
Excellent. We also, I think, just got a question on how to sign up for the challenge if they haven't already done so. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the link into the chat to officially sign up to take the challenge. This is a really helpful way to, it helps us track who to contact. So we make sure that you get all of our resources, all of the updates about the challenge, as well as the data forms that we disseminate in March and in May. So I'll drop that in the chat. And then we are asking folks to decide if they want to take the challenge by November 11th. So we do have a deadline to sign up to take the challenge. So be aware of that as well. Any other questions coming through, Jillian?
None that I see so far, but just wanted to provide the link so we understand that this was a lot of information given to you all at once and you still might have questions. And Sarah and I are going to be available for technical assistance requests. And so I'm going to put this link here if you want to schedule a specific time for a little bit more one-on-one meetings with Sarah and I to go over, questions about identification or with data, secure sharing and all of that. So we will send a copy of this PowerPoint to you all with a lot of these forms because again, a lot of information is coming at you. So know that that will be sent out later in a few days.
Great. Any other questions? Oh, I see Daisy asked a question about a webinar on the Winscp, and yes, we are working with CSAC to create some more guidance on how to interpret the results. So once you do the data match and you download your matched data sheet, we'll kind of explain like what happens if you see 2 GPAs submitted, what happens if it says that there's no EFC. So we'll go through all of those sort of results and what to do. The other thing to be aware of is on that webpage with the policies and tools that we've been linking in the chat throughout the webinar today, there are videos and written instructions on how to get set up with the Winscp system and how to upload and download files. So those resources are already available in sort of PDF and video format. course, I can't find the link I'm looking for in the moment. Let me see if I can find it. I think I got it. Here we go. Any other questions, concerns, sources of confusion? All right, I'm dropping in the link to register for the challenge right now. The last thing I will mention too, we have 64 signups to take this year's challenge. And Jillian and I have sort of organized all of the signups by county because we're trying to get a sense of who's in close proximity to each other, where are there potential opportunities for collaboration. And our hope this year is to kind of form pods based off of county or region. So we will be reaching out to you kind of saying, hey, here's, you know, a nearby district or a district in the same county who also wants to take the challenge. Here's the homeless education liaison and the county office of ed who we really want to bring to the table as part of these efforts. And so we're going to be doing some coordination behind the scenes. So just be aware that those opportunities will also be presented in the future, because again, I think everyone emphasizes today, this really is going to take a lot of collaboration. It's not something that any single person is expected to kind of carry the brunt of. So we want to make sure that we're making those connections and figuring out ways that we can kind of all do this together. So be on the lookout for that. And then I think that's it for us. I'll be sending out a follow-up email with all of the links that we shared today. Again, that request form to receive technical assistance, if that's something that you need, we're more than happy to provide. So be on the lookout for that. And again, thank you so much for your willingness to participate in this challenge and shed light on how important it is that we're working with our high school seniors experiencing homelessness on maximizing their financial aid and pursuing their post-secondary goals. So thanks again for being here, and thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
You.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.